Hello and welcome to the final part of the Fade to Light jacket make along. Today we will be adding bands to your jacket and it will be completed. The bands help to frame the jacket on fronts and make the neck opening neat. They also help to hide the floats of yarn along one of the edges where we change from one whirl to another and where we alternate it with yarn B. And third purpose of the front bands is to fix the opening. So you can choose from two options in the pattern. Either you make the bands with the same stitch pattern as for the yoke. It's an airy mesh pattern, and you can add, for example, clasps later because you will not have any buttonholes, or you can choose another option where the front band will be a little bit more stiff and you will also add the holes for the buttons so that you can later sew the buttons on the another band and close your Fade to Light jacket with the buttons. So these are two options that are given in the pattern, and I will show you how they are both done. On one hand, the bands is the easiest part of any garment pattern because they are always straightforward. You understand where and what exactly you should do. But on the other hand, it's also one of the most difficult parts because it's not always easy to work evenly along the edge of your front. If you add too many stitches here, your bands will be wavy and it will not look nice. And if you put just a fewer stitches than you need to, your band will pull. It means your lower body will jump up and it will also not look neat. So the trickiest part with the bands is to work them evenly. The pattern will not give you the exact stitch counts because every size has different depth of the yoke, and every size has different depth of this pattern with the spikes. And if you decide to make your jacket longer or shorter, it's just impossible to give the stitch count for the bands. So your main task is to work along the edges evenly, and I will show you how we will do that. Both options with the mesh bands and with the bands which have the buttonholes, they are started in the same way. So first you finish the lower body. You should stop on the right side on the edge and you should work single chain single into the last stitch. So this is the same point for both options. When you make this single chain and another single into the last stitch, you turn a quarter, you stay on the right side and you continue to work your band along the front edge. So we stay on the right side and that's the right front. If you imagine that you wear this jacket like this is your neck. Like you look at your jacket from above, you see that it's the right, because it's my right hand, it's the right front. So the first front we work is the right front, and at first I will show you how to do the band with the buttonholes. The right front is also the front where we will add the buttonholes. So first row should be done with the even single crochet stitches along the edge. What I advise is to choose to change to a smaller hook. I decided to drop one size down, so I will use 4mm hook for my band. And I decided that on the mosaic part and on this yoke part I will make one single into one like stripe or two rows. So 2 rows make one stripe, right? So these are 2 rows and these are 2 rows. So I decided that I will make 1 stitch here, 2 stitches here, 1 here, 2 stitches here. So I will alternate 1 single and 2 into the next stripe, which is made with a different yarn. So to begin, I will make first single into this. You see this like a kind of V, this single stitch which was made on the right side, and when inserting the hook I will split this stitch so with that, because if you work below this stitch like this, you will have the hole. So to prevent this, I will always insert the hook into the stitches, so inside the V, to prevent the holes. So I made 1 stitch into next single. I will make next stitch into this hole, and next stitch into the single, and next stitch into the next stitch. So on this very bottom you should play around to see what gives you an even look. And here, when you reach the pattern with the spikes, I will do what I have already mentioned. So I will make 1 stitch here and 2 stitches here. So I make 1 single into the next stitch made with whirl, and I will make 2 singles into this blue part made with yarn B. So I will insert the hook here behind below the bump, and the next stitch will go into the single. And again, I will make 1 stitch into whirl rows and 2 singles into 2 rows made with yarn B. And again, 1 into the whirls and 2 into the stitches made with yarn B, and so on. So when I am finished, you see that the band doesn't look wavy. It just right, I would say. It looks even. If you feel like it's wavy, you can change to even a smaller size of the hook. On next rows for the yoke, I will do exactly the same thing. I will make 1 single into the next 2 rows and 2 singles into the next 2 rows. So I skip this bump, make single into next single, then I make single below the bump and into the next single. Skip the bump, single, oops, it split. So skip the bump, single into single, and then under the bump and into next single. And you continue like this until you reach neck opening. So you work up to the neck opening here. Again, you see that it pulls just a little bit. It's better if the band pulls a little bit, because after you block your jacket, it will be even. But if it's wavy, on this first row, you should remake it and make either less singles along the edge or change to even a smaller hook. So I will make the first row up to the neck opening, and I will see you there. So we made the singles across or along the edge of the front, and we made the last stitch in the corner of the neck opening. That was row 1. Row 2 is very easy. It's made on the wrong side. So you turn, chain 1, make a single into the first stitch, and just continue with the singles in every stitch along the front edge down to the hem of your jacket. Very easy row. So we made 2 rows for the first option of the band, and on row 3 we will need to make the buttonholes. For the buttonholes we will need the markers again. The pattern says to put first marker 0.5 centimeter from the neck opening in my case it will be the second stitch here from the neck opening. That will be the placement of my upper buttonhole. The lower buttonhole will be, I would say, somewhere here where my lower mosaic pattern ends. And I think I will place, let's say, 2 more buttonholes somewhere in between those two. So here you should play and to see where exactly the buttonholes will go, so that you have the equal distance between each pair of buttonholes. So let's say, I would put it, let's say here maybe, and the next one will go, let's say, somewhere here. Right? I think that will work. But before I start making the buttonholes, I would like to count the stitches between these 4 markers. So between the first and the second one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 stitches. Here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 stitches. That's correct. They are equal. And here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So this distance is 2 stitches smaller than these 2. So what I can do, to make them all equal, I can make this distance 11 stitches. So what I need to move this marker 1 stitch below. So I have 11 stitches here. Here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 stitches I also have here. And here I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So this marker will go 1 stitch up. And now I have 11 stitches between all markers. It means that the distance between the buttonholes will be equal. And I'm ready to start with the button band, making the holes for the closure. So we are making row 3 once again. Chain 1 and single crochet into each stitch to 1 stitch left before the marker. Here we are. This is the marker. And this is 1 stitch left before the marker. So now we should chain 2, skip 2 stitches, 1, 2, and make single into the next one. And we remove the marker. We will not need it anymore. So this is the size of the buttonhole you will have. If you think that this is too small for your buttons, you can do the buttonhole bigger by making more chains. So you will stop not 1 stitch before. Wait, it was here. So you will stop 1 stitch before. So you will stop 2 stitches before the marker, and you will make 3 chains, 1, 2, 3, and skip 3 stitches, 1, 2, 3. So that will give you the bigger buttonhole. So again, you should play with this to see what's better for you. I will stick to the pattern because I like small buttons on my garments, and I will make smaller buttonholes. So I will make only chain 2, skip 2 stitches, and continue. And you will repeat this bit for every marker. So again, you will continue with the stitches up here. 1 stitch should be left before the marker, so you will stop here. You will make chain 2, skip these 2 stitches, and continue to the next marker. Up to the neck opening. Here is how row 3 looks. I kept my markers in place to show you all holes I made. So I made 1, 2, 3, 4 holes. Of course, if you want to add more buttons, you can make more holes. It's just up to you. You will just place the markers closer to each other to make more holes. So that was row 3. Row 4. On row 4, you will work across the band again, making the stitch into the first one, and when you reach each space, depending on how many chains you made, so that's the number of stitches you should put into each hole. So I made 2 chains, skipped 2 stitches, so I should bring the stitch count to the very first one. So I skipped 2 stitches, made 2 chains, so I will put 2 stitches into this 2 chain space and continue to the next one. If you made your holes bigger or smaller, you should make exact number of the skipped stitches under this space. So I'm coming to the next space. Here it is. So I put 2 singles into this space again. And I continue with that to the very bottom of the front. And that will be row 4. On row 5, you will do it on the right side again. So you will just continue working across the front up to the neck opening. And that will be the end of your band. If you want to make it a little bit wider, you can add 2 more rows, for example, but important that your final row is on the right side. For the next band on the left front, you will need to join yarn B in the corner of your neck opening. Please make sure you stay on the right side. I think you don't have any choice, you will stay on the right side anyway, but make sure you join yarn at the neck opening and not on the lower edge of your front. So you join yarn with chain 1, chain 1, and make a single crochet into the same stitch as join in the corner. So now you will work down from neck opening down to the bottom of the front, working just in the same way as you worked for the first front. So it's very important that you have exactly the same number of stitches for the another front. So you should count the stitches on this first front. To me, it helped that I counted the number of stitches on the lower part, which was made with yarn bead. So for example, I have here 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches. Then I counted the stitches, how many of them I have on the lower body with the spike stitch pattern, and then I counted the number of stitches I have across the yoke, and that helped me to make exactly the same number of stitches along another front. So knowing how many stitches I had across the yoke, I can make this exactly the same number of stitches across the another yoke. So on this another front band, you will work in the same way as you did for another one, with the difference that you will insert the hook also under the floats of the yarn to hide them. You see this float where we changed between the yarn between 2 whorls. On the smaller sizes you will not have these floats of yarn on the yoke, but you will definitely have them on the lower body where you changed for the spike stitch pattern. So I decided that I will make 2 singles into the one stripe and 1 single into another stripe. So I made 1 single, I make another one, and now I will insert hook into the next row under the floats of yarn to hide them. So now I will again make 2 singles here and 1 single into the next row. 2 singles into the next and 1 single into the next. You see, by working under the floats, you hide them both on the right side and the wrong side. On this front, you will not make any buttonholes, so you will just work with single crochet stitches across the front down to the bottom. That will be row 1. Then you will turn, make row 2 on the wrong side, and you will repeat the same number of rows as you did for this first front, so that both fronts are the same in width. Whatever width of the bands you choose, the second band should be finished on the wrong side. So make sure you make exact number of rows as for the first band and finished on the wrong side. You see, at the neck opening you will be. And now we will continue, we don't cut the yarn, and now we will continue to work the collar around the neck opening. It will help us to frame the neck nicely, to add some height, and also to fix the bumps here which were left from the short rows. So now we will make the collar. We finished, once again I will repeat, we finished the second band on the wrong side. Now we will chain 1, turn a quarter, and we'll continue to work the collar on the wrong side. First row is made with evenly spaced single crochet stitches, again along the neck opening. First we should work this short bit on the top of one of the bands. So we chained 1, we make the single crochet into the same stitch as last stitch of the band, and we continue to work evenly along the neck opening. On the neck opening we have, it's very easy because we had the chains here to start, so we can just work single crochet into the chains and singles. So basically we can work with 1 stitch in each chain from the beginning of our yoke. See, it gives us nice first row. If you feel like it's a little bit loose, you can again switch to a small hook here, because on the next rows we will add chains again, so I would not recommend to make less stitches, but I would rather change to a small hook here. So we continue with the same, in the same way, until we reach another band here. So I came to the edge, I worked with the single crochet along the neck opening, and I came to another edge where the front band with the buttonholes is, and I decided to make the last stitch into the last or the first stitch of the band to make the transition between the collar and the band invisible. The second row is made on the wrong side, or no, the second row is made on the right side, of course, because we worked the first row on the wrong side, and now we will be making row 2 on the right side. And it will be made in this with the same stitch pattern as the yoke. So we will make the mesh collar. Chain 1 and single into the first stitch, chain 1, skip 1 stitch and single into another, and continue this with this stitch pattern until the end of this row. So you will continue working with chains and singles until you come to the edge, and that will be the place where you will put the final stitch of this row. If your stitch count is not odd, if it's even, then you will need to place somewhere in the middle, for example, make a decrease or skip 2 stitches instead of 1, just so that you end here nicely with chain 1, skip this stitch and make the last stitch here, or maybe even in the first stitch of the band to make the transition between the band and the collar invisible on this edge as well, so that you don't have the bumps. So here is row 2, and row 3 will be the same as in the yoke pattern. So you will be just making the singles, chains, skip the chains, and you will repeat this row 3 until you get the desired height of your collar. So you just make it until you reach the desired height, and that will be the end of your Fade to Light jacket make along with first option of bands which have the buttonholes. And now I will show you another option which is made for the clasps. The difference between the two options of the front bands is that in option 2 we will work at the same time along both fronts and the neck opening. So we will make both bands and the collar in one go. That's easier, but we will not have the holes for the buttons, so you can use this option if you would like to add the clasps to your jacket, or if you prefer to leave it just open. So first row of option 2 is made in the same, the beginning of the first row is the same as in option 1. So we finished the last row of the lower body on the right side, and we made single chain, single into the last stitch. And now we turn a quarter and continue with the same pattern as for the yoke along the front edge. So we need to work here evenly. I decided that I will make the singles in every bump or after every bump. So I will make the chains over the bumps, and I will make the singles in the next stitch after the bump. And we'll see how it works. If our band is too loose, or if it's too tight, or if it's just right. So chain 1, skip the bump, make single into the next single. Again, you should split the single, so insert the hook into the V so that you don't have the holes. Chain 1, skip the bump, and insert the hook into the next V. Chain 1, skip the bump, and single. We reached the pattern with the spikes, so chain 1, skip the bump, single, chain 1, skip the bump, single, chain 1, skip the bump, single, and so on. I will make a few more stitches and then we will see if it works or not. As an option, you can always choose if you want to crochet looser or tighter, or you can switch to a smaller or to a larger hook so that your band is not too wavy and doesn't pull at the same time. So let's have a look. I think it looks quite neat. I think it's not wavy and it doesn't pull. I think it's just right. So I will continue with the same method until I reach the neck opening, and we'll see you there. I reached the upper corner of the front. Here is the neck opening, here is the band, the front edge. Chain 1 and make single, chain 2, single into the corner, and that will be the corner between the front edge and the collar. And we should mark this chain 2 space to easily find it on the way back. Now we will continue along the neck opening, and here everything is very easy because we have the chain spaces here and the chains already occupied with the stitches. So we will chain over the chains and make the singles into these chains which are already occupied with the stitches from the yoke. So chain 1, skip the space, single into the next chain, chain 1, skip the space, single, chain 1, skip space, single, chain 1, skip space, single, and repeat the same until you reach another corner of the neck opening, which then goes down into the edge of another front. So see you at this corner. Before we move to the corner and before we are done with the neck opening, I would like to show you a small trick. If your chains in the very beginning of the yoke were very loose, you might get the holes here when you add the angles along the edge. You might get the holes. If you don't like, I'm quite okay with how they look, but if you don't like them, you can use this small trick. So when making a single, you can insert the hook not into this space, chain space already occupied with a stitch from the next row, but you can insert a kind of, you can make in a kind of a spike, so you can insert the hook a little bit lower to this stitch below. Wait, don't split the yarn. You can split the stitch, but don't split the yarn. And it will make the holes not so visible. So you can really, or you can even insert the hook into this bump of the post of the stitch and make a single once again. You skip this chain space and you should work the next stitch here, but you don't want to make a hole. So you can see this small bump of the next post here. You can insert the hook under this bump. Make sure not to split the yarn. Then you insert the hook into the chain you would do normally and complete the single. So this small trick, insert the hook under the bump and into the chain. So this small trick helps you to reduce the holes. So here I worked in the normal way and you can see holes here, which I'm okay with. I personally like it, but if you don't like it, you can use this small trick and to work the singles without the holes. So we reached the edge, another edge, and we are on the left front now. So what we need to do is chain one and make single, chain two single into the last stitch and mark this last space so that it's easy to find it on the way back. And now we will continue to work in the same way as for the first front. You will work down from neck opening down to the bottom along another front. Again, chain one and insert the hook into the next bump, or how we did it. We chained one, skipped the bump and made the single into the next stitch. So again, chain one, skip this bump with the float and insert the hook into the next stitch. Chain one, skip the bump and insert the hook. Again, as in option one, make sure that you have exactly the same number of stitches on the second front as you made for the first front, so they are identical. And when you work on this another edge, make sure to insert the hook under the floats, all floats of yarns on the edge to hide them. Here how it will look. And you will continue with this to the bottom of your jacket. That will be row 1. Row 2 is made on the wrong side. We'll work from the bottom of your jacket up to the neck opening, up to this corner, and then we will continue to work along the neck opening. The stitch count is the same for the yoke, so you chain one, single into the first stitch, chain one, skip the space and single into single until you come to this marked corner. So we came to this marked space and we should make single, chain, single into this marked space. Single, chain two, single into the marked space, and I recommend that you again mark it. This is not written in the pattern, but I would recommend you to mark this. Chain two space on every row. And now you will continue with the same stitch pattern along the neck opening. You single crochet into the first stitch, and continue with the same stitch pattern. Chain, single, chain, single, chain, single, until you come to another corner here. You do the same for the another corner, and then you continue with the stitch pattern along the front edge down to the hem of your jacket. That will be row 2. I'm making row 3 of the bands. So I went from the bottom of the front edge along the front edge with the same stitch pattern until I reached one stitch before the marked space. So now we'll chain 1, skip this stitch, and make single, 2 chains and single into this corner space. And I will continue in the same way until the next corner space. So chain 1, skip next stitch and single crochet into the next stitch, and continue with the same stitch pattern until you reach next corner. Here you will again stop one stitch before the marked space. You will chain 1, skip this stitch, single, chain 2, single into the marked space, and continue with the stitch pattern down to the hem. And you will repeat rows 2 and 3 until you get the desired widths of your bands. After the bands are done and you are happy with how they look, so you are happy with the widths of the band, you can either leave the collar as it is, or you can add a little bit of height to the collar only to make it a little bit higher if you want to. That's not obligatory. If you would like to add the height to the collar, you will need to do it on the right side by joining the same yarn you used for the bands in the corner space, chain 1 and single into the same space. Then you make a single into the next stitch and continue with the same stitch pattern. So chain, single, chain, single across the neck opening, across the collar, until you come to another edge. When you come to another edge, you will make the single into the last space, and that will be row 1. And on row 2, you will just make the first stitch into the first single on the wrong side, then you will make one more stitch into the next stitch and continue with the same pattern. So on all next rows you will make the singles into the singles and chains over the chains, and you repeat these 2 rows back and forth, alternating right and wrong side until you get the desired height of your neck opening. That's it. That was Finalizing Jacket Make Along. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you learned something new. I hope you are not afraid of making the crochet garments, and I hope that many more jackets and cardigans and sweaters will appear in your creative life. And I hope to see you again sometime. Bye!